Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski. I'll be your host for today. And for those who might not know, we've been celebrating space this week, and it's been a pretty incredible week. This is day 4 now, and we're just wrapping up with our final hangout of the day, but we spent the week so far and the day with astronauts and scientists and engineers from NASA and JPL and private industry and even National Geographic explorers. It's been quite a great week, and tomorrow we have another exciting day coming up. But now I'm very excited to introduce our guest for today. So we have Dr. Marc Rayman. He's a scientist and engineer. Currently, he's the chief engineer and mission director for Dawn with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And so Dawn right now is orbiting the dwarf planet Ceres. So Marc's passion for space is pretty strong. It's been with him ever since he was a child and followed him through to his current career. And he loves to share the thrill of space exploration and science with the public. So he does have some pretty cool hobbies as well, besides the exploration of space, international folk dancing, photography, hiking, and he even has a black belt in karate. So Marc, it is so good to have you joining us with classrooms across North America today.
Well, thanks. I'm really happy to be here and to talk with all of you students as well. As Joe said, I've been interested in space since I was 4 years old. I love space, I love science. And in fact, when I was 9, I started writing to NASA and to scientists around the world. And also when I was 9, I decided I wanted to become a scientist and become a doctor of physics, which is a branch of science that deals with discoveries about from particles smaller than atoms to the whole universe full of stars and galaxies. And I stayed in school until I was 29 years old. Imagine how old that is. But I loved learning so much. And yet at the same time, my dream all that time was to work for NASA. And my dream did come true because now, as you heard from Joe, I work at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And I just feel so lucky to work here. I've worked on missions that go deep into the solar system, farther away than Mars. And I've worked on missions that have peered beyond our solar system to the most distant galaxies in the universe. And as Joe also said, I love that I really love to share it with people like you who are also interested in it. And so let me switch my screen here a little bit so I can tell you a little bit about what I've been doing. And then after we get this going, so can somebody confirm that this is now showing up?
We've got it.
Okay, good. So I'll just give you a little bit of an idea of some of the things that I think are so exciting that I've been lucky enough to work on. And then if you have any questions about space or anything else, I'll be happy to try to answer them. So here, just to get started, you see the main spacecraft going across the screen there is Dawn. That's the spacecraft I'm controlling right now. And in the upper left corner is a dwarf planet called Ceres, which Dawn is orbiting. And in the lower right is Vesta, which Dawn orbited a few years ago. And I also included another spacecraft in the lower left corner called Deep Space One, which was a previous mission I worked on that was one of my favorites, but I've gotten to work on many. But to start, just thought I'd remind you of, this is the night sky. And this is what got me interested in space. I mean, this is outer space. And maybe you've looked up at the stars sometimes and wondered what's really there. I think most people do that. I've always loved looking at the stars. But, some places are so far away that even with powerful telescopes, we can't get a good view. And so this is Vesta, the first place Dawn went. And this is the best view we had with the powerful Hubble Space Telescope. And it's not really very good. It's just kind of a fuzzy little blob. But when Dawn got there, it showed us a whole alien world. And I just think it's so exciting to to discover a mysterious world like this and to explore it. And so here's a movie based on pictures that Dawn took of what this world looks like. And this place is 350 miles across. So this isn't, I think a lot of people think of asteroids where Vesta is located in the main asteroid belt. They think of asteroids as sort of chunks of rock, you know, maybe the size of a building or a mountain. But this is 350 miles across. And maybe you can see going across the center there, these sort of troughs or grooves. These are canyons larger than the Grand Canyon. And Vesta has more than 90 of these huge canyons. And now here, going across the screen, you can see the part of a crater here. This crater where I'm pointing with my cursor is more than 300 miles in diameter. This is part of the crater wall. And we're looking down on a mountain here that's more than 100 miles across. And the mountain rises to more than 2.5 times the height of Mount Everest, the tallest mountain we have here on Earth. And so this is a world entirely unlike the one that you and I live on. And to me, it's so cool to get to explore a place like this. So that's Vesta, the first place that Dawn went. And now it's orbiting dwarf planet Ceres. And this is a strange looking world. You can see many of these features on it that are very bright, really reflective. And in fact, there's one just coming into view there in the center. And there's this mysterious crater with these bright lights. It just looks like lights shining up at us. In fact, what it really is very reflective material on the ground. It's like having salt scattered on the ground, and that salt reflects more of the sunlight than the other dirt and material on the ground at Ceres. But to me, when you look at a picture like this, it just makes you want to fly in closer for an even better look, and that's exactly what we did. And we now understand that Ceres has salt water underground, just like the water in our oceans has salt dissolved in it. And this is salt from when the water has evaporated. It leaves behind this large area on the ground as if you sprinkled salt on it, and that makes it look white and bright. And Dawn is orbiting this dwarf planet now between Mars and Jupiter, collecting all sorts of information. And the reason I included this picture is this is one of the pictures Dawn took of Ceres, and this really draws me into it. And to me, it looks like it could be the view out the window of your spaceship as you're about to land on this alien world, ready to touch down at sunrise with mountains casting long shadows in the early morning light. And as you're about to set your spacecraft down on the surface, you could start planning where you're going to go after you put your spacesuit on and climb out the hatch. And one of the things that I think is so cool is sending a spacecraft to places like Vesta and Ceres is very, very hard. You know, it happens in science fiction a lot, but it's hard. It really is. And in fact, it would have been impossible, not just difficult, but impossible to send Dawn to these alien worlds if we didn't have ion propulsion. And the first time I ever heard of ion propulsion was actually in Star Wars. So maybe you recognize in the middle there the Star Wars TIE fighter that Darth Vader and others in the evil empire used to fight Luke Skywalker and the members of the Rebel Alliance. And in Star Wars, the TIE fighter, TIE, stands for Twin Ion Engine, because this was the most futuristic, coolest, advanced technology they could think of. And to me, one of the things that's so neat about working on a project like this is getting to turn that science fiction into science fact. And here's the Dawn spacecraft using its advanced ion engine flying into orbit around the mysterious dwarf planet Ceres just a little more than 2 years ago. And that's where the spacecraft is now. And here's a picture of an ion engine operating here at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, where I work. And you can see it really does produce this cool blue glow like in science fiction movies. So this is the real thing. And here's an artist's concept of the ion engine on the spacecraft on Dawn, thrusting to push the spacecraft through the solar system. And this is very much what Dawn really looks like, as it's using its advanced ion engine to travel deep, deep into space to discover the nature of these mysterious alien worlds. And here's another view of the spacecraft. It's a big spacecraft. From the left edge to the right edge is 65 feet. That's the distance from a pitcher's mound to home plate in a professional baseball field. This is a very large spacecraft. And the reason it's so big is because we send it far from the sun. So the sun is faint at the great distance that Dawn is operating. And so it needs a large area of these solar cells to capture enough light to produce electrical power to operate all of the spacecraft systems. So it runs on electricity just like everything does in your house. But of course, out in space, we can't plug it in. We have to produce the electricity using sunlight. And to me, there's a lot more to an interplanetary spaceship like this than ion propulsion. It takes a lot of people working very hard for 4 or 5 years to design and build it. And it's hard, but it's a lot of fun. And here's a picture of some people working on the spacecraft when it was on the ground. And here the solar rays are folded up because you can't fit these long solar wings inside the nose cone of a rocket. So they get folded up, and I'll show you later how they open when they get into space. And here's another view when it was on the ground with one of these solar array wings opened up. Each wing is the width of a tennis court. So this is really a big spacecraft. And you can see over on the right here, is a man who's working on it. And these people wear these white protective clothing to keep any little particles of hair or dust or skin from getting onto the spacecraft. The spacecraft has to be kept very clean.
Hey, Mark, I just want to pop in for a second.
Yeah.
Incredible. Your presentation is so good. I know the classrooms are loving this, but the last 2 slides haven't gone through for us.
Oh, really?
And I think possibly if we stop the screen share and start it again, it might kick things off and get them going again for us.
Okay, so there's stop sharing.
But absolutely incredible. You must feel like a big kid some days.
I feel like a big kid every day, Joe. To me, it is so cool to be able to do this. So now, can you see a picture of the spacecraft?
Yep, it's moved on for us. Perfect.
Okay. Did you see this picture?
Yep.
Okay. So here again is the picture of the spacecraft. And this is where I was saying, this is one of the solar array wings here folded up, because if it were stretched out, it wouldn't be able to fit inside the nose cone of the rocket. And you can see some men and ladies over here on the right and on the left, and in this next picture, another one, and they're all wearing this protective clothing that I was mentioning. And here you can see this one solar array wing that's the width of a that's the width of a tennis court, which I think is really neat. I mean, this is just such a cool spacecraft. And then you put this spacecraft together and you put it on top of a rocket, and you actually get to launch this big rocket from Cape Canaveral in Florida. And then, in fact, we launched the Dawn mission here at dawn. Here's the sun rising in the background. That was really neat to be involved in sending it up on a rocket. And then I'm going to switch to a different spacecraft, my Deep Space One, just because I have a nice animation of it, showing you how it opens up its solar array wings. It unfolds them like that, stretches them out, and points them at the sun. You can see the Earth and the Moon in the background. Then it turns on its ion engine and then travels deep, deep into space, past the Moon, past Mars. I mean, this spacecraft now, Dawn, is more than 1 million times farther away than astronauts on the International Space Station. more than 1,000 times farther than the moon. And you get to see cool alien landscapes like this one on Ceres, where the view here is from inside a crater. So this is the wall of the crater. And this is a volcano that we discovered on the distant world Ceres. And I think, I mean, what could be cooler than that? And as Joe and I were just talking, every single day, I'm happy that I get to work on such neat things like this. And that's the last picture I was going to show you. Go back to, do you now have the normal view?
Yep, you're back.
Okay. And so the getting to control a spacecraft like this, I think, is really cool. Mission control for Dawn is just down the hall from my office. So every aspect of this, the designing the spacecraft, the building it, the launching it, the operating it, looking at the data that comes back, I think it's all really exciting. And I just think everything about the exploration of space is exciting. And I hope some of you think so too. And if you have any questions about Dawn or anything about space at all, I'll be happy to try to answer your questions. I thought it'd be more fun to spend time talking about what you're interested in than what I think is so cool.
All right. Well, I have no doubt that we're going to have some questions from the classrooms joining. Those are some pretty awesome projects, and it really is an exciting time for the kids who are growing up right now. There's so many cool opportunities now and coming up in the future in space exploration. It really is an exciting time. So thank you for sharing your
excitement. Add something to that. I think it's, if you're interested in space exploration, you know, you don't have to work in science or math. That's, of course, what most people do. But to build spacecraft, we need people with all kinds of talents. We have people who are responsible for the business end of things. I mean, NASA buys products from private industry, and we have people who take care of making sure that it's a safe place to work. Here at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the other NASA facilities, we have our own fire department, we have doctors and nurses, we have security teams, we have people who help maintain all the facilities here to make sure everything can work. So it takes all skills and all talents. And again, most of them are people who, like me and maybe like some of you, love the science and math. But, you know, you can be involved in it in just about any area as long as you pursue it and do a good job. Then that gives you the opportunity to work in something like this if you're interested.
All right, another absolutely great point. So let's meet some of our classrooms because I'm sure they have some good questions. So let's jump over. I'm going to turn on a microphone. We're going to go to Calgary, Alberta first, to St. Joseph's School with Mrs. Slaney's class. Your microphone is on. How's everyone doing in Calgary today? All right, fire a question away. Let's go.
Is an asteroid going to hit Ceres?
Did you say, is an asteroid going to hit Ceres?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Asteroids hit Ceres very often. Ceres is the largest object in the main asteroid belt. So there are millions and millions of asteroids orbiting the sun between Mars and Jupiter. Ceres is the biggest, so it has the strongest gravity, and so it sometimes pulls other asteroids in. And of course, the asteroids are moving around in many different orbits, different paths, and so sometimes they'll just hit. And so those craters that you could see on Ceres and Vesta, and craters that you see on other places as well, like Mars and the Moon, come from objects in space that fall to the ground there and carve out a big crater. So Ceres has been hit by many, many, many asteroids over the 4.5 billion years that it's been in the main asteroid belt, and it will continue to in the future. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
All right, well, we're probably going to come back to see you guys again but I want to make sure we introduce all the classrooms. So we are going to jump to our next class. This is grade 6-7s joining us in Courtney, and it looks like they're in British Columbia from their email address. Let me turn on your microphone. How are we doing, everybody? All right, you're on. Let's have a question.
How long did it take to make dawn?
Did you say how long did it take to make dawn?
Yeah.
We started designing it in 2002, and it took about 3 years to design it. Then we had to build it, and that took another 2 years. So from the start of the design until we were ready to put it on top of the rocket was about 5 years. A long time.
Absolutely. Great question. Just a shout out to any classrooms who are watching live on YouTube right now. There's a YouTube chat sidebar on the right. Let us know where you're from and send us in a question because we'd love to squeak some of those in. So let's now go to Kalispell in Montana, where we have a group joining us. Oops, that's the wrong microphone. How are we doing in Montana today?
Good.
How cool was that presentation?
Really great.
Awesome.
Yeah, really good.
All right, let's go with a question.
Okay, Josiah's got our first one.
So with Dawn's motor, does it run on the electricity that the solar panels use, or does it run on something else?
That's a good question. It uses the electricity from the solar panels, but it doesn't use only the electricity. The way it works is, well, let me remind all of you how a regular rocket engine works. Not remind you, but tell you. You take a gas and you heat it up, or you put it under pressure, and you push it out of a rocket nozzle. And the gas rushing out of the rocket nozzle pushes the rocket in the other direction. Does that make sense? Okay. So
Yes.
the ion engine works the same way, but instead of pushing the gas out with heat or with pressure, we use electricity. And so we have a tank of gas called xenon, and we use the electrical power from the solar arrays to shoot that gas out of the engine at 90,000 miles per hour. And that pushing that gas out or shooting it out at such high speed is what pushes Dawn in the other direction. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
I see lots of thumbs up, so that was a pretty good answer, I think. And that's pretty cool, and that's pretty darn fast, how fast it can push the gas out of the engine.
And in fact, Dawn's ion engine lets this spacecraft go faster than any other spacecraft can do with its own propulsion system. That's why they use it in Star Wars.
All right, very cool. We have not visited our high schoolers in Raleigh, North Carolina. So with Mrs. Ripalone, let me turn on your microphone. And I bet you've probably got a question.
Nobody there is excited, though, are they?
Yeah, we do have a question. Yeah, man.
How many years do you think Dawn will be used?
I can't hear it all.
Right here, right.
How many years do you think Dawn will be in use?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, first of all, let me remind you, we launched in late 2007, so it's already been in use a little more than 10 years. But the end of the mission will be next year. So it's going to run out of one of its other propellants on board sometime around the beginning of the next school year, about a year from now, a little less maybe. And then it will no longer be able to control its orientation in the zero gravity of space. So it won't be able to point its solar arrays at the sun, it won't be able to point its antenna at Earth, it won't be able to point its sensors, its camera and other devices down at Ceres, won't be able to point its ion engine in the direction it would need in order to go someplace else. And so at that point, the spacecraft will just stop operating, and that'll be about a year from now.
All right.
Your question?
And so there's a question, it's coming from online, but it's Mr. Palmer's class. They were joining us before, but maybe they had some technical difficulties that sent them offline, but they're still watching on YouTube. And they're from Midhurst in Canada, in Ontario. And they're wondering, how does the signal from Earth reach Dawn?
Another good question. So Dawn uses a radio transmitter. And on one of the earlier pictures I showed you, maybe you saw it had a dish on it. In fact, I happen to have a model of Dawn here because I love cool space things. So here again, I hope you can see the Dawn spacecraft. Here again are the big solar arrays. And this is a radio antenna that's about 5 feet across. So probably about, roughly the same height as many of us. And we point that radio antenna from across the solar system at Earth, send a radio signal that can take a very long time. Radio signals travel at the speed of light, the fastest speed we know, and yet it can still take half an hour to get from Dawn all the way across the solar system to Earth. And then we have really big antennas on Earth, some of them more than 200 feet across, that capture this radio signal, and that's how we communicate with it.
All right, so we've met all our classrooms. What do you think? Should we take another swing through? Do you have a little bit more time?
I do, if you do.
Excellent, of course. Let's go back to Calgary, Alberta. You guys have another question?
Yeah. Why did you name Dawn Dawn? Why did you?
You said, why do we name Dawn Dawn?
Yeah.
Because Vesta and Ceres are left over from the time that the solar system was forming. In fact, they're left over from the dawn of the solar system. Let me just take a moment to tell you how our solar system formed. There was this big cloud of gas and dust, and it started to collapse under its own weight. Okay, so it got smaller and smaller and smaller, and in the center, there was so much material packed together so tightly, that it formed the sun. So that's how the sun formed more than 4.5 billion years ago. And then surrounding this young sun was this swirling cloud of gas and dust. And sometimes particles would, oh, sorry about that. I mean, hope that didn't distract you. Sometimes these particles would hit and stick together. And then another particle would hit and stick to that. And another and another and another, until they built up and made rocks. And the rocks would grow even larger, eventually to form planets. And Vesta and Ceres are left over from when this process was occurring more than 4.5 billion years ago. And so we believe that by studying them, we can learn more about how our solar system formed and how it has changed over the 4.5 billion years since then to have places like Earth, where you and I live. So once again, we call Dawn Dawn because we're learning about the dawn of the solar system. I know that was a quick explanation, but I hope that made sense.
Definitely. Pretty good name when you explain it that way. Absolutely. Back to Mrs. Marks' group. Your microphone's on.
Bonjour, et puis question Sam.
Is it possible for Dawn to blow up?
No, there's no way it could blow up. We make spacecraft so they're very reliable and so they can survive all of the harsh conditions of operating in space, the extremes in temperature, the radiation, the zero gravity, the vacuum, the rough ride on the rocket. And so we're careful to make sure that, that it will operate safely and productively. And there's no more reason it should blow up than your computer should blow up or anything else. I know it happens in movies a lot. It doesn't happen in real life so much.
Yeah, probably the riskiest moment is the launch itself.
It is. Riding on a rocket, those rockets, is really hard for spacecraft.
All right, let's go back to Montana. Your microphone's on again.
Hey, Brooke, sit down. Thank you. Okay, Braden, go ahead.
So when are they planning on making a newer model of Dawn?
Well, we're not going to. So Dawn was designed specifically to go to Vesta and Ceres. So we've gone there. We've learned so much about them. But we're not going to build another Dawn. But NASA is working on another similar spacecraft that's going to go to a different object in the main asteroid belt, an asteroid called Psyche, kind of a funny spelling. It's spelled P-S-Y-C-H-E. Name comes from a Greek name. And this spacecraft also will use ion propulsion, and I think it will launch in about 2023 and explore another alien world using an ion engine to get there.
All right, and one more time, let's head back to North Carolina with our high schoolers and see if they have another question.
Okay, good. What kind of lens does Dawn use, like infrared or X-ray?
I can't hear.
Okay. What kind of lens does Dawn use, like infrared or like visual or X-ray?
I still don't know.
What kind of lens? What kind of wavelength does Dawn use?
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Wavelength. Sorry, that wasn't her fault. I just had difficulty hearing it. So, first of all, for the younger students, let me just remind you or tell you that when she says wavelength, you know, light comes in different wavelengths. Like red light isn't the same wavelength as blue light, and there are other kinds of light as well. So Dawn studies the light from Vesta, reflected from Vesta and Ceres, at many different wavelengths. From infrared, which is a wavelength of light that we can't see, but of course we know exists, just like there are sounds we can't hear, but dogs can hear them. So it's infrared if you actually know the specific meanings of the wavelengths. It's a wavelength of 5 microns. Does that, okay. From 5 microns all the way down to visible, and visible, you know, is around 0.7 or a little more, 0.7 microns, or 750 nanometers or so. Through the visible, red, all the way down to the blue, and then just into the ultraviolet to about a quarter of a micron, or 250 nanometers. Does that answer?
Yes.
In terms, okay, all right, but there's more than just that. That's regular wavelengths, but Dawn also studies or measures gamma rays, if you know what they are. So beyond the ultraviolet, even more energetic than that is X-ray, and even more energetic than X-rays are gamma rays. And you normally don't speak of gamma rays in terms of the wavelength, but they're much higher energy. Dawn measures those as well. And Dawn also measures neutrons, which, except in a subtle way that maybe I won't get into, you don't think of also as having a wavelength, but they're a subatomic particle that Dawn measures.
All right. Well, Mark, so great to have you spending some time with us today and sharing what you do and your passion for space exploration. And you know, you've just got a really good way of telling a story and breaking things down and making it really accessible to classrooms. So thank you for that.
It was my pleasure, and it was also fun for me to see many of you students and to know that you're interested in this sort of thing, and I hope you stay interested, and whether you work in it or not, I hope you at least follow these cool missions, because they teach us so much about the universe, and I just think they're really exciting.
So you mentioned following cool missions. What's next for you?
Well, I'm going to keep working on Dawn. We're about to send the spacecraft down to a lower altitude, closer to Ceres than we've ever done before. And I can't wait to see what cool new landscapes we're going to reveal when we do.
And so can classrooms follow along maybe on Twitter? Is that a good spot to kind of follow along?
You follow Dawn on Twitter or Facebook or on the website, dawn.jpl.nasa.gov. And I hope you do.
Excellent. Well, once again, classrooms, thank you so much for joining us. Your questions, as always, were great. And Mark, it was incredible to share your story. And I definitely think you've got a few more students thinking about space exploration and just what could be possible.
I hope so. Somebody's got to do it in the future.
All right. Well, let me turn the microphones on. We'll give the classrooms a chance to say goodbye and thank you. And we'll sign off for today. So here we go, classrooms, nice and loud. All right. Good job. You knew you were up to the task. Well, once again, Mark, enjoy the rest of your day. Classrooms, enjoy the rest of yours as well. And join us tomorrow. We have another 7 more events to go to wrap up Space Week. So we hope you're enjoying the Hangouts, and we'll see everybody again soon.
Thanks, Joe.